everybody, and welcome back to Men's Day Out. For the first time, you'd be seeing more than two people on our screen, and I'm very happy to welcome all three of you today. So, to begin with, we have Dr. Rakesh Kapoor, somebody who is an encyclopedia when it comes to child's rights, and a lot of people already know you, Dr. Kapoor. Also joining with us today is somebody who really doesn't need introduction if they've been following men's rights movement, is none other than well-known documentary filmmaker Deepika Narayan Bhardwaj. Hello Deepika, and thank you very much for gracing Men's Day Out finally.
Really? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And we also have somebody who has never said no to me whenever I have reached out to him for help, and at any point in time, at any hour of the day. Welcome Amit. Amit Lakhani is from Delhi, and he heads the SIF NGO in the name of Men Welfare Trust. So on that note, I welcome you all, and I wish you a very happy Independence Day.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, happy Independence Day to you all.
Yeah, thank you. Happy Independence Day. I think that's wonderful. That's a great start.
So the reason we have gathered here this evening is to discuss a recent Madhya Pradesh High Court order which has come. And to give you brief facts about this case is where, we had two consenting adults dating each other since October 2018. For some reason, the boy backed out of marriage recently this year, and the girl and her family dragged him to court and charged him under the section of rape. To begin with, Dr. Kapoor, what are your first thoughts when you read this order?
I think the whole concept of rape or sex on the pretext of marriage being classified as rape or technical rape is, to my mind, extremely bizarre. That's one, of course. But secondly, I think when I read this order, there were a couple of lines on this order which kind of just shook me. In a way, one was, of course, about saying that a woman under no circumstance has sex unless she is assured that she's going to marry the guy, which means that we should just ban the whole concept of Tinder outside India and say Tinder and Shadi.com are almost synonymous, and let's just move it there. Second, I think the second line which really got me was also, in spite of the two of them belong to a different religion, which by itself shows that, what are we trying to propagate over here? Just because the two people are from different religion, that means there can be no sex or marriage or any such concept. So I think that was my first reaction, and which is when we all decided that I think we need to talk about this and discuss this.
Right. I'll come back to you, Dr. Kapoor, on this, but let me go to Deepika because she is, working on her next documentary called India's Sons, which particularly deals in false rape cases. And she has done a lot of in-depth research, especially when it comes to rape on marriage or rape on pretext of marriage law. So Deepika, just throw some light on the macro picture of how this law came into being, and what are the implications that youngsters today are facing because of this law.
Okay, it's going to be a little long if I give you the entire background, but I'll try to keep it brief. Mr. Sanjay Hegde, who's a very renowned Supreme Court advocate, is a part of India's Sons as well. And this whole thing of rape on promise of marriage started from a case called Uday versus State of Karnataka, where Mr. Sanjay Hegde was actually from the prosecution side. And he somehow was trying to convince that, this consent obtained on promise of marriage basically vitiates the consent of a woman. So if the man does not marry her, then basically he obtained her consent on a fraudulent means. So that should be considered rape. What happened in that case was the person was acquitted because, there were a lot of facts and circumstances of that case. But what led to the Supreme Court actually got into very, very in-depth discussion on what, forms consent and whether a promise of marriage could actually lead to vitiating of a consent of a woman, even if she's adult, even if she knows that, there could not be a marriage later, but on what ground was the consent obtained? So Supreme Court went in depth into it. And after this judgment came, although the man got relief, and these are Mr. Hegde's word, although the man got relief, but this sort of consideration around whether a marriage promise can become rape or not actually started. And as we all know, lawyers look for an opportunity. Slowly and steadily, people started now bringing in, promise of marriage into the ambit of rape. There were far few and, very little cases in between, as much as I've researched for India's sons, before Uday versus State of Karnataka. And even after Uday versus State of Karnataka, until 2013, when the rape law amendment came, they were there, but they were not like, that, every sort of third case is like that. If I may actually put it now, it's every 1 in 2 rape cases, because the statistics that we have as per National Crime Record Bureau in 2005, so there's a bifurcation of the kind of relationship is there between the victim and the perpetrator according to NCRB. Before 2015, this bifurcation used to be neighbor, somebody from the family, and an absolute stranger. So these kind of bifurcations used to be there. But since 2015, there became a bifurcation of rape on promise or false promise of marriage by either a live-in partner or a boyfriend, or somebody else. So there have been different kind of headers over the years so that nobody confuses me. So there are different. So from 2015, when these cases formed 22% of the total reported rape cases in India, in 2019, it has stretched to over 45% to 49%. And if I may actually state it here, in some states like Orissa and some other states, even in Delhi, the percentage is extremely high. In Orissa, it was 85%. And in some states, it's from 53% to 65%. So we are now talking about one section of these allegations which are forming a majority of the rape cases. If I look into the macro picture, the problem here is it's extremely subjective, and whenever the jurist becomes dependent on morality, it goes into an extremely dangerous space. So because I researched so much on these issues, I have the opportunity to read a lot about laws. And whenever morality comes too much into the idea of justice, it takes a very dangerous notion. So the MP High Court judgment also, in fact, what Mr. Kapoor said, I would want to draw a different, observation from it, that when they were from different religion, I think it was very clear to them that there will be extreme amount of difficulty for them to get married. So it is no, there's no confusion that the woman could have known that getting married would be very difficult. And then if he did not get married to her, she turns around and accuses him of rape and false promise of marriage. And with you could make any statement on the facts of the case, whatever you wanted to make. But saying that no woman in this, unmarried woman this country is getting into a sexual liaison with a man, if there is not a promise of marriage, is, I think, stretching it too far.
And I'll continue that with Amit. So Amit, let's take your example. You are a single man, a young man. Let's say you get into a relationship with a woman today. What, according to you, is the concept of promise of marriage? Because on one side, we say, the courts are becoming liberal. They have been accepting live-in relationships. In fact, there have been cases where married women are approaching court to get protection, with their partners, whether married or unmarried. So on one side, we have these kind of cases. And on the other side, we have an order which says India is a very conservative society and no woman would get into a physical relationship unless she has assurance of or promise of marriage. What would you consider a promise of marriage? At what stage while somebody is dating would these factors come in? Since you deal with a lot of cases on ground, please share some example on this.
Yeah, Anas, before I come to the question that you have asked, I would like to say that these kind of orders, which are coming from the courts very often these days, these are extremely dangerous precedents, when these orders are being passed on the basis of the prejudices and presumptions and personal beliefs around morality of the judges. They are not made as per the law. They completely ignore the basic principle of natural justice. They are completely far away from the ground realities. Like you just said that, if a man and a woman gets into a relationship and they are into a consensual relationship. Now, if a woman chooses to just back off from that relationship, she can simply say that, I don't want to go ahead even after 5 years of relationship, 10 years of being together. She can just say that, for some reasons I cannot go forward, I cannot get married, don't want to be in the relationship, I want to get out of this, and it will be completely okay because the man has nowhere to go. He doesn't have an option lawfully. Whereas if a man in a similar situation, he backs off, he says that, I have my reasons for not continuing the relationship, I have my reasons for not getting into marriage, then the girl can simply, on the basis of one statement, can file a rape case and the man will be behind bars. So you see how the law itself has been loosely drafted, where there is no clarity on the consent, and then like Deepika explained, how every other case wherein there is a relationship and the relationship is going sour, there is a rape on promise of marriage, a case being filed. In fact, I have seen so many cases in the recent past where girls are filing these cases to pressurize man to get married to her. There are so many incidents where in the bail hearing, the man was told either say a yes to the marriage or go behind bars. So imagine the kind of pressure that is built around a man when these cases are filed, and imagine the blatant misuse which is happening after these rape law amendments. The criminal amendments happened after the Nirbhaya incident in 2013, where the law was completely overhauled, and there were amendments made on the basis of the public sentiment. There were amendments made on the basis of what was going on, the sentiment which was going on the streets and the media pressure, without applying mind to what are the repercussions which are going to be if these laws are misused, and innocent men go behind bars and they are destroyed, their lives are destroyed, and there is no recourse for them. So when I see these, and to add to it, coming back to this judgment, Arnaz, on one side, the Supreme Court of India, none other than Supreme Court of India, not very long ago, decriminalized adultery. So a Supreme Court thinks that the time has changed and it is okay if one indulges in sex outside marriage. And on the other hand, this HC order completely defies the idea of bodily autonomy and implies that a woman will only consent if there is a promise of marriage. Otherwise, an unmarried woman won't indulge in a sexual act as they're too conservative. I mean, there is no coordination between the Supreme Court and the High Court bench which has said this. Now various benches will interpret law as per their own thoughts, their own beliefs, their own background, and there is no accountability. In a similar situation, Bombay High Court would have said something else, a Delhi High Court would have probably given some other orders, and a court in Bihar would have given, some other orders. So what I'm trying to say is that there is no one line of thought across judiciary that this is what is the line of thought that we should follow when these kind of cases come to the court.
And, also to put in some data, 2019 NCRB report stated the state of Uttar Pradesh recorded 46% of rape cases which were filed as rape on pretext of marriage. Dr. Kapoor, let me pose this question to you. And I would also like to bring in this tweet which came out from the India Me Too handle this morning. So they were kind of, blaming the judge for his patriarchal mindset, for, kind of challenging, the independent thoughts of a woman and how she could, have her own choice for a sexual relationship. Obviously, yes, the mindset of the judge, as Amit rightly said, it depends from person to person what morality for him or her is. But, don't you also think that somewhere women on one side, want to have this freedom, want to have this whole, being liberal, and when it doesn't go their way, when things don't fall in line the way they want to, it's very convenient for them to kind of go and file rape on pretext of marriage. So, what are your thoughts on, how do we really address this hypocrisy in society?
Have the cake and eat it too, is what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. That seems to be the problem. But I think the bigger issue around this, as I look at it, obviously, let's not deny the fact that the mindset which was betrayed by the court in this order is something that does exist in a large portion of our country. It does, so there is a portion of that which does exist, and which is where the problem, in a way, we all celebrate the diversity of India, right? But when we create these laws, that is where there is a bigger problem around that diversity actually becomes a handicap, because each of those laws cannot cater to this huge population of India. Laws need to be specific for that community, which is there, which has its own culture, which has its own socio-economic background. There are multiple such factors which happen. So I think the bigger problem here is very poor drafting of laws, which leaves everything to the interpretation of that judge. Now, unfortunately, what happens is that the two people who are fighting a case, now this is in this case, right, which is very personalized cases. Two people who are fighting, they could come from a very different background, very different social, from where the judge is sitting. So I don't want to blame the judge, because the judge is coming from his set of or her set of own experiences in life, right? But unfortunately, so the bigger problem here is that you need to create clear-cut guidelines. Like, when I say there is a same Supreme Court of India which says the child is not a chattel, which means that you cannot shift from one to the other. The very next day, the same Supreme Court says that the child is not an appendage, which means that the child is not a property of one single person. That person, it must be shared. I mean, so much amount. So really, actually, if you look at it, and I will be a little harsh in saying this, what is the difference between a panchayat and a justice system? A panchayat runs on the whims and fancies of the sarpanch who's sitting on top without any other. Unfortunately, that's what our justice system also seems to be becoming. It has become that the judge who's sitting over there at the whims and fancies can actually pass any kind of an order. If the person is taking a decision on the basis of a law which is well drafted, well clear-cut guidelines which are written down, that's his or her right as a judge. But to be able to throw and change the way the society should think, I think that person has absolutely no right to do so.
On that note, let me ask you, Deepika, does any other country in the world have this kind of law where, there is a breakup between couples and the woman can go and file rape charges on the boyfriend or the partner?
No, not that I know of anywhere across the world. I don't think so. What is making things actually worse in India is this whole idea where if there has been a sexual relationship between the man and the woman, and it is proven that there was sexual relationship, although nothing is proven for that as well. I mean, we are not going by medical records. We are not going by medical of the woman is not necessary, especially in cases like this, where the allegations have been made after 2 years, 3 years, 7 years, 9 years, 15 years of the relationship. Medical proof obviously doesn't make any sense over there. But the problem arises where the court says that if the consent was there, or if it is proven that there was a sexual relationship, then from the point of view of proving of that consent, the burden has completely shifted. Now the man will have to prove that the consent was not taken on any deception or fraud or anything. Earlier, in fact, not in just these cases, whatever judgment I read, and I've read enough and more judgments, what I see very clear from these judgments is that the burden of proof has practically shifted completely on the guy. Now, what makes the whole idea of rape on promise of marriage extremely bizarre and subjective is The Supreme Court itself is completely confused. उनको भी नहीं पता कि हो क्या रहा है. Somebody says if the first promise was made with an absolute fraudulent, intention, and then the sexual act happened, and after that, if it continued for a long time, and if the woman really clearly had an idea that the marriage is not likely, then it does not become rape. Somebody says, if there was a sex and then it continued for a long time, and the man just kept on promising marriage to the woman, then he was basic. So the whole thing is that there have been sexual acts done over a period of time. Now, if you read the FIRs, I mean, it's anybody in a very, in any society who would be a little logical or rational would actually laugh off these allegations, saying, उसने मेरा उस होटल में जाके बलात्कार किया, उसने मेरा उस होटल में, उस शहर में, उस जगह पे. For years and years, everywhere they are talking about a sexual act which was consensual to be rape, just because retrospectively they have withdrawn their consent. So even in the minds of judges, they don't really know what constitutes a crime under this section, and that's why judges are so completely confused. But the problem here is the moment an FIR happens, the man is arrested. Custodial interrogation की कोई जरूरत नहीं होगी, फिर भी the man is arrested. You don't know whether the man has made a promise or not, still the man is arrested. You don't even, there have been cases that have come to me, Anaz, where two people were very much in love with each other, but there was no promise of marriage. There was not even sex. There have been cases where there was no sexual relationship also, but they wanted to get married, and the woman would say that he had sex with me. Who is going to prove whether there was a sex or not? Nobody is listening to that. And if I may actually share, a few days ago, there was a case where a 35-year-old woman filed a rape case on false promise of marriage against a 17-year-old man. Now, I was talking to a very senior police officer who is from that area where this FIR was filed. And this, honestly, I have to admit, a lot of cops are really, really bad, but a lot of cops are really, really good. And he was one such guy. His helplessness was visible in his voice, in his sound, and I could feel it. And he said, ma'am, you tell us what to do. If we tell a woman that this is not rape, ma'am, you were in consensual relationship, आपका जो भी उनके साथ था, 2 साल था, 3 साल था. He said there have been cases that have come to us, ma'am, जहाँ पे बच्चा भी है उन दोनों का. फिर भी the woman says कि इसने मेरे साथ बलात्कार किया है इतने सालों और अभी मुझसे शादी नहीं कर रहा है. He said, ma'am, अगर हम कुछ भी इनको advice करते हैं, if we say anything to the woman and she gets really angry at us and she doesn't get what she wants, she would go to the State Women's Commission, write a complaint against us. Nobody wants to, put a stake on their job. So they're like, ma'am, हमारे को Supreme Court ने बोल दिया है, उनकी statement जो है, औरत की statement is an evidence. हम उसके basis पे FIR file करते हैं, हम उसके basis पे charge sheet file करते हैं. उसके बाद court देखे, justice देखे, हम हमारे हाथ बांध दिए हैं, हम लोग कुछ नहीं कर सकते.
But Deepika, I'd like to stop you there. You said it's a 35-year-old woman alleging rape on pretext of marriage on a 17-year-old boy who is technically a minor. And even in this case, the police is helpless. So,
yes.
Where are we heading?
No, because the guy has not complained. So this gentleman actually told me that, ma'am, I'm very sure that the moment this guy is going to get out of jail, he will file a POCSO case on her. Police has to function according to what the complaint is coming to them. So yes, they got a rape complaint.
He will go to jail. He will go to jail first, and then let him fight his case. Irrespective of the number of years that he has to spend doing so.
So now the cop said, ma'am, he said he's 17, but he looks like an adult guy of 24, 25 years. And I'm like, do you actually have all of these judgments when a woman who is 17-year-old comes to you? By law, you are bound to follow that she is a minor, no matter whether she consented, did not consent, anything left, right, center, doesn't matter. But of course, they don't have too much answers. They are doing what they think is the law.
Right.
Can I just interject and just ask to the two women on the panel a question? As I see it, they have made sex today into a contract where a woman is the giver and the man is the taker, right? How does that actually make you women feel? I mean that they've made sex into an absolute contract where, I mean, either you need something in exchange, whether it's after marriage and alimony or before marriage, a certain promise of marriage. I mean, how does this make the two of you feel? I mean, an honest question.
In fact, I was going to pose this question next to Amit. And it's not just rape on pretext of marriage, but you see so many of these cases coming out of the Bollywood industry or the television industry where they say, oh, we were promised a role in a movie or a role in a teleseries or in a web series. On that pretext, we had sex with the producer or the man. And when he was not able to comply with his promise, that turns into a rape. So, as you rightly said, Dr. Kapoor, why is anything or why is sex, always considered to be, done on pretext of getting something in return, or even marriage? Like, for marriage, I mean, why do we make sex as the most important point that, okay, because this is a relationship between a man and a woman, now the man needs to kind of compensate back to the woman. So, I don't know who wants to take this question, Amit or Deepika?
Arnaz, I think
Yeah.
I'll just add to what Dr. Kapoor said. I think they have, made this definition of sex as if they're trying to tell people that sex is pleasure for the man always and pain for the woman. So that's the idea behind all of this. And let me just tell everybody that you don't need to actually even be in a relationship or to actually have sex. There are so many cases, and I can vouch that there would be thousands of cases where there was never even a sexual act, and a rape case was filed. There have been cases where two people have interacted on Facebook and rape cases have been filed. So the law itself is such skewed up that that a statement is enough to put the man behind bars. Like Deepika rightly said, a woman will just go with whatever reason, whether she is it's an act of vengeance, whether she wants to settle score. Cases are being filed for grabbing property through land mafia. There are honey trap gangs filing cases for blackmailing and extortion, and of course these pretext of marriage cases where guys are being pressurized to get married to that woman. And left, right, and center, the law is being abused. They just don't see whether prima facie any case is being made out. A statement is good enough to lodge an FIR against the man, and the fact that you are a man is enough to term you a rapist.
I think I'll take up what Dr. Kapoor said. Well, I think we are the wrong women for this question to be asked, Dr. Kapoor, because we do not see ourselves as victims and human beings who are devoid of any rational judgments or taking responsibility of our own actions. So I'm not too sure if we are the right women to ask that question. But what I really want to say in context of what you asked is, see, there is no denial that there are cases where women are sort of emotionally manipulated, where they are pressurized probably for the better want of word, or sort of induced into a sort of a promise or whatever. Yeah, so what we are seeing happening is that what could be exception is now being made into a norm. So in rape and promise of marriage cases also, where there could be cases where the man would have actually, with a very fraudulent intention, had sex with the woman, and then that was the reason for the woman to actually approach the court of law. Now they have put these cases in an ambit where any broken relationship can tomorrow be called as rape. And the worst thing is that the punishment precedes trial, in sort to say. Jail time precedes any investigation whatsoever. And this is complete violation of rights. This is complete violation of the spirit of Constitution. This is absolutely against equality. You are not treating two people as same at all.
But I would, also say, Deepika, that there's a lot of hypocrisy in this because, on one hand, you want to say women are completely empowered, let them decide what they want. And other hand, you can't project that India is a conservative society if things are not going as per her wishes. In fact, if you ask me, even the judiciary has not been spared, and that's what brings me to the role of media when they kind of publish these cases. I will pose a situation to you, and I know the person very well. So there's this guy in Delhi who has been fighting for his elder brother who ended his life. He was in a relationship with a girl from his college days. The two dated for nearly 9 years. They were together. Both of them had very clear indication that eventually they are going to get married. Both of them promised marriage to each other. But by the time they would, have turned 28, 30 in their lives, both of them probably, or maybe the girl would have felt that he's not the right man for me. I need to have different perspectives in life. So she told him that I'm moving on with somebody else, and you can also move on. I mean, there's really nothing that is going to kind of hold me back into this relationship. Now, in this situation, when you say that there will be questions from the other side that, oh, you don't know what the woman is going through. But then in scenarios like these, I think men are equally vulnerable. They are equally emotional. I'm not saying we should support people ending their lives, be it a man or a woman. But there will be cases like this, and particularly in this case, whenever the man went back to his girlfriend, she actually made statements like, "Oh, you can die. I don't care. You can go to hell," and which is what ultimately happened. He ended his life. Today, the matter is in court. His younger brother has been fighting for many, many years. They've charged the girl with abetment to suicide, but there is really no case, and the woman is out on bail. So, you have to look at these situations from both sides. You can't just make it a...
No, absolutely. There is no denial about that, Nas, but there is one perspective of having a neutral law, which is a far-fetched dream, but there is another perspective of right now, because the cases are there, because the cases are being filed every day. So if we say that, it has to change, then what is the change that we are all asking for? Whether we are asking for a complete scrapping, that there should not be a provision where, consent has been allegedly fraudulently taken, then there should be no repercussions. Or, I just wanted to take a point of view of everybody in case,
I think in the act there are situations wherein the consent would not be considered a consent, wherein if there was intoxication, if there was a use of force, or there was some kind of a threat. But in these cases where a woman says that it was fraudulent because the marriage did not happen, if she thinks that if the marriage, it's a fraud if the marriage does not happen, then a woman who's adult, grown up, she has her own mind, she should not get into a sexual act itself unless she gets married. Then if that is her morality, if that is the standard of morality, that in case it does not end with a marriage, then it is a fraud, then she should actually get married and then get into the act, because you're getting into an act, you're consenting in the act, and then you're saying that if the marriage does not happen, it becomes a fraud. I've seen upteen number of cases where men who thought that eventually I'm going to get married to her, and they were dumped. They were completely used for months and years together, and they were dumped when the girl got a better guy. She got a greener pastures on the other side. She moved on, and the man was dumped. Now, if the man goes and say that I have been wronged, or I have been there has been a fraud against me. Imagine if when we talk about equality or gender equality or the laws being neutral, then imagine the situation if this happens, if the victim is the other gender.
No, but in these cases, we've seen, Amit, largely on Twitter, people say, oh, just move on. Which world are you living in? Don't hold back to your past. When it comes to men being dumped, these are the situations and the statements.
That's the bigotry. That's the bigotry, Arnaz. And in fact, even the feminist ideology, the so-called, in the recent discourse, the so-called feminists in India, they have been talking on the lines of bodily autonomy of the woman. They should have the freedom to have sex before marriage, after marriage, outside marriage. It is their choice. So this judgment also in a way goes against the feminist thought that a woman can or should be able to have sex unless there is an intention to get married to that person. So that means
the feminists will not write a letter to this High Court judge the way they wrote to Pope Day. They will not write, because it's working in their favor.
Yeah, so now the feminists won't say that don't teach women morality, don't teach women lessons of morality, that they should not have sex unless there is marriage on the cards. Why not? Why are they not coming with their candle marches right now? Against the judges and the judiciary, because here the man is being targeted. The life and liberty of the man is being curtailed here. In fact, Arnaz, there's a case which came to me few months back, wherein the guy and the girl, they were in relationship and they broke off. There was never a promise of marriage, or even this thing that they would get married to each other. Somehow it did not materialize, and girl moved on and the guy moved on. And after the guy moved on, the guy actually got married in a family outside India. And girl probably would have thought that when I move on, I will also get a good marriage prospect, and I will get settled and all that. But when she saw that this guy has really got married elsewhere, after 8 or 10 days of marriage, she files a case of rape on false pretext of marriage. The man is behind bars. After 8 or 10 days after his marriage, he was put behind bars. It's been 8 or 10 months now that the wife calls me every week, every 15 days, and this wife is fighting the case for her husband, and she's completely broke. That what is the situation? My husband is behind bars, for no fault of his, because the ex, didn't like that he got married to another woman who's probably she feels is better than her.
Yeah, it
Imagine,
is at the end of the day, like you said, if the woman thinks that my ex-boyfriend has found a better prospect in life, it is a kind of revenge. There's nothing to do with. Surely he's not.
It's an act of revenge. It's an act of revenge in so many cases. It's an act of revenge. It's settling scores, and now that woman is asking for few crores of rupees from this girl who comes from other countries. She's an NRI. She feels that now I can actually cash in from this situation, and a lot of money is being asked for. And now if the money is paid, then there is no rape. So the rape case are being settled in the mediation centers. Monies are being exchanged, and that's how the law is being made a mockery of.
So before we wrap up, let's take a couple of points from each one of you to understand how do we address this. I think right now the bigger problem is nobody in the government really even wants to discuss this issue. Forget government, nobody even in social media, except the men's rights activists, they don't even want to listen, because honestly, for common public, a rapist is a rapist. They don't care, what are the charges framed against him. I think now, after we've started kind of putting out these stories in detail that, oh, this was not a rape, what, you would kind of perceive in your mind, but this is something, which is being filed when a relationship failed. That is when people are, actually standing up and understanding that, why the rape numbers are kind of jacked up the way they are. So Dr. Kapoor, concluding statements, what do you think are the two best suggestions that we can take as a country and kind of secure both the genders in their own right?
No, I think I'll put two suggestions. One for specifically this case. One of the things that we need to do, just the way there is gender sensitization programs which exist for the judiciary, why don't we, and all the people who are watching, just take up any Cosmopolitan magazine, any of those Vogue magazines, and send articles to this particular judge saying, this is the reality of India. I don't know which world are you looking in, or which world are you living in. Truthfully, if you just read those articles and things, they talk, and very rightfully so, about women's sexuality, which should be discussed. Why shouldn't that man be able to educate himself? I think I would like all your listeners, viewers, to actually just pick up articles and send them to this judge and say, why don't you just go ahead and, educate yourself? But looking at it from a more larger picture of what are the changes that we as a society, I think very clearly, I look at it, we can have more transactional and tactical ways to deal with one particular issue, but a larger issue which I raised is about India is an extremely diverse country. You need very clear and very well drafted guidelines for managing each and every issue. That means, there is, if you read whether you read the CPC and you read, the laws are drafted to be very short, right? against each law, there should be at least a few pages of explanations which should actually very clearly, outline what is. So if you look at I'm forgetting the name of the very famous justice who wrote this Nirbhaya law, right?
Justice
Justice
Verma.
Verma.
I think he expired.
Justice Verma.
Justice Verma, right. So I think he would be turning in his grave if he were to see that this is what his laws have now been interpreted here. If he had left behind a very beautiful explanation of what he wants to, what he means by each of these statements, I think that would make great sense in actually making all the difference.
Absolutely. Deepika, your 2 points. How do we arrest this problem without pun intended?
I actually honestly don't know because there have been PILs filed. There have been some kind of activism also that is happening. I think what I would want to just say is something that could probably actually help men. There's one thing which is aspiration, and there's one thing which is reality. I think we got to be real and realize that the laws are extremely biased. So I think if you can have a kind of a WhatsApp chat or something that, pre and post whatever happened between both of you that you can always later produce, that will probably minimize the harassment that you would be put through just in case you get, alleged. Anticipatory bails used to be unheard of in rape cases before, but if you look at the case list of any high court today, there are a lot of anticipatory bails listed in rape cases, and there are cases where the courts are actually granting anticipatory bail as well, and that is granted invariably on the basis of the evidence, predominantly of these interactions where there was no conversation about marriage and everything was hunky-dory between the two people until unless things went sour because of a breakup. So it's I think meaningful for men to be safe than sorry. I'm not trying to put fear in everybody's mind. There are good men, there are bad women, there are bad men, and there are good women. I think people need to be responsible when they make sexual choices, both men and women, I guess. And since the laws are extremely skewed towards women, if men can take precaution, then I think that will be a good thing to do. And yeah, that's the only thing. And as far as changes are concerned, I think there has to be a very holistic discussion on this in the parliament. There is no other way. The Supreme Court is not going to do it. There has to be a very holistic discussion on this in the parliament, and probably a discussion on what changes can they do.
Just a quick addition. So the advice that you're giving, very practical, very important. But unfortunately, I'm just going to simply say, are you saying that whether it's a man or a woman, start creating your bedroom as if it's going to get to the court tomorrow? What is that going to do to the relationship? That's what literally we are actually moving towards, to a society which is terrible. That
most people don't even know what the law is. Most people, when they indulge in a relationship, they don't know whether there is a law where there will be a case on promise of marriage against them, and they're not aware.
Why not create an insurance for them? So go buy insurance at the age of 18, because as you said, 95% of these cases are settled by money, right?
Yeah, but insurance will not protect you from going behind bars. So yeah, just to protect you from going behind bars, you need to have an anticipatory bail first, so that you can actually use that money for yourself and settle the rape cases like they are being settled today. But on a serious note,
I'm saying, Amit, we are laughing about this issue, but it's the same thing which is happening in matrimonial cases. Like earlier, we used to say matrimonial cases are only about the daughter-in-law, her family, the torture that she goes through. But today you are seeing women from the man's family standing up because they're saying, what about our justice? So similarly, I will see, I foresee a pattern where a lot of women today, are a part of this whole brigade of saying, teach your sons to do this, teach your sons to do that. Sooner or later, I think they will realize how biased the laws are against our boys today. And we're not saying that, you permit them to do whatever they want to. But I think the mothers to boys also need to stand up and raise their voices against these kind of gender biased laws. So for me, I think that will be, an awakening that can only shake the parliament or whoever is in power to kind of address this and discuss this. And Amit,
Anas, when people talk about the rape laws or crime, the rape crime which is happening around, they don't know the other side of it. They don't know that most of these cases which are being filed are all false cases on the pretext of marriage or some other pretext. So men must actually open their eyes to ground realities. They must be aware of the gender bias laws of the land. They should know that their acts of chivalry can land them in jail. And awareness is the key. And I think we as NGOs have been trying to sensitize men and boys through various platforms, through seminars or gender sensitization programs in colleges and all that. But I think men themselves in today's time, they should make themselves aware of the situation, and they should be vocal. Everybody should be vocal about what is happening around these laws and around the misuse of law, so that people know how vulnerable they are and how to protect themselves.
So I think our key takeaway from this entire session has been, one is there's very, very less awareness around the kind of laws that men have against them today, especially when it comes to rape on pretext of marriage. You may never know, the love of your life at one point in time would actually drag you to the police station if things don't work out. And as Deepika said, try to collect evidences, but then I do agree with Dr. Kapoor also that, when you are in love, I mean, how feasible is that to kind of doubt your partner that, oh, one day you might land up in the police station together. So I think awareness is the key, and I think it's also about kind of publishing as many of these judgments as we can on a daily basis, which will somewhere push people in power, influential people, to at least start a debate around this topic. Only then we can kind of move forward in any direction that India chooses to. On that note, let me thank each one of you for taking out time on Sunday evening. And I hope to see you guys back very, very soon on discussing, different topics again. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnab.
Thank you, Arnaz.
Thank you, Anas.